listening and watching to Mad Men Sports. Mad Men Sports has an exclusive interview for you today, and that is sponsored by Black Button Distilling.
Today, Jake and I will be joined by James from Texans Unfiltered podcast, so we can pick his brain a little bit about what's going on with this big matchup on Saturday between the Bills and the Texans in the first game of the Wild Card playoffs of 2020. Happy New Year. Let's get going. We have James from Texans Unfiltered. James is going to help us out with a little bit of information about the Texans today. James, is this Will Fuller without Will Fuller thing for Deshaun Watson as big as everyone says it is?
Yeah, it's just as big, if not bigger. When Will Fuller is on the field, Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback, just based on stats. And obviously the eye test too. Our offense without Will Fuller is average at best. And he basically, what people don't realize about Will Fuller is, yes, he's really fast. And the outside world knows that. But really the biggest thing that makes Will Fuller just a key part of this offense is his route running as well. So when you are able to combine the 4.34 speed with very crisp route running, that's what makes him dangerous. And he's able to get separation. His out routes are just, it's Deshaun's go-to when he's on the field. And then obviously, downfield, he brings an element to this offense. But I don't expect Will Fuller to play. I know that he's practicing this week, but I wouldn't expect him to play based on just kind of how Bill O'Brien has brought up Will Fuller in his past press conferences in the last week. It seems that he's kind of over kind of worrying about Will Fuller. I think the biggest thing that comes to that is a part of the Will Fuller aspect of this offense is that it's the game plan can't evolve without Will Fuller, and I think it's always been that they count on him to come in. I'm hoping that this week, Bill O'Brien kind of scraps that and without Will Fuller and lets Kenny Stills or keeps the game plan with Will Fuller and just lets Kenny Stills play that role, because if that's the case, then I think we'll be all right. But past without Will Fuller, this offense is average.
I mean, overall, the biggest thing is that you mentioned there was you don't think he's going to play. Buffalo is kind of shaking in their boots right now, thinking that he might be back, because everyone sees the stats. Everyone across the NFL sees the stats about Watson with Fuller and without Fuller. I think him not playing or being even a decoy this week to have to extra plan for is a very interesting move by O'Brien. And now, I know he's kind of had a weird view on the outside world of the NFL. Not everyone always likes the things he does. Is Bill O'Brien a good in-game coach?
I think he's an average in-game coach. You don't see a ton of adjustments. He really wants to run the ball. And he will, even Mike Vrabel, last week, not last week, but week 15 in his little is on the Titans website, talked about how Bill O'Brien will just continue to repeat the same plays, and especially when it comes to the run game, he won't abandon it at all. And that's accurate. He really does want to run the ball. He thinks that that's kind of the key to the offense, and I get it to an extent. I think we're the number 1 run on first down team in the league. So, yeah, I wouldn't say he's a great in-game coach. But then, we've seen times this year against the Patriots specifically where there were adjustments made that really helped this offense and this team get going.
No, absolutely. And listen, I think one of McDermott's strengths is being a great in-game coach to adjust. He does everything in the week to prep for the game. He's got a great staff with Leslie Frazier, and whether people are he's a polarizing figure, but Brian Dable is very interesting enough to bring along a guy like Josh Allen, who's no one's really in loved, but everyone's starting to come around on, and people around the country are really starting to take notice to Josh Allen. You said he wants to run the ball heavily. Is Carlos Hyde, like, what makes him better than most? Like, he has great games, and then there's games where he disappears. I know he's got Duke Johnson there. What gets Carlos Hyde going? Is it just the fact that he's force-fed the ball?
Yeah, I think it really all comes down to kind of like the first quarter for Carlos Hyde. I think there's been a couple games where in the second half he'll get going, but really for him, it's just a rhythm. If he's able to get 4 or 5 yards at a time in the first quarter, then, it tends to be a long day for the opposing defense. If he's not getting the yardage, then, he tends to try to cut back more often than he should, as he's really not a cutback type runner. So it's about getting him going early and just sticking with it for us to be able to have a good run offense, especially against you guys. Even though I know you guys your strength on your defense isn't your run defense, the strength of your defense is the middle, and that's where Carlos tends to run. So yeah, it's really just more of a rhythm thing with Carlos Hyde. If he gets going early and he's feeling it and he's running hard, he really can. He could really wreck a game plan. But we've seen lots of times this year where he'll be bottled up, 1 to 2 yard gains consistently, and we're at third to 5 a lot.
Yeah, and that's getting him going is something that could really happen against this Bills rush defense. Adrian Peterson had 100 yards in the first half against them. If they were to have a weakness per se, it would be the run defense. Just really not getting going the way they should. Obviously, they've made a lot of adjustments since, and that's turned around. But if they get Carlos Hyde going early, I could totally see that being a problem. You don't know what they're going to stop then, because you have to defend the pass. That gives a whole new element to the team that you really don't know what's going on. So J.J. Watt's coming back, and he's kind of, he's coming directly back way earlier than anyone would ever think. Is he going to be kind of like a Fuller thing, like you mentioned? Is he going to be more of a decoy, or is he going to be out there and effective, or not so much?
No, J.J. Watt wouldn't be back if J.J. Watt didn't feel that he could go 100%. That's just not JJ's mentality. That's not JJ's approach to the game. With JJ playing, with him being active, there should be no load management. This should be a full-on regular JJ Watt game, and it couldn't come for a better time for this defense.
Yeah, I mean, he's been Defensive Player of the Year. He's had at least 2 pick sixes against the Buffalo Bills, even directly. I mean, he terrorizes the Bills in a way that I've never seen an NFL defenseman do in a long time. He's kind of got the Bills' number here. So he's another guy when the Bills are kind of seeing that he's back. It's kind of like maybe we should throw out all we know about this Texans defense and really focus on what we think we could do. Stay away from him. Obviously, Whitney Merciless. Sorry, that's a tough one for me still. Merciless, thank you. There's a lot of good players on that defense individually. As a unit, is it as bad as the stats say they are, or is it just matter-of-factly with that?
Well, I'll say this. I think, Merck, I think before JJ went down, had 4 sacks and, fumbles. And then when JJ went down, I think everything kind of started to, obviously the only person you had to key in on as far as from a pass rush was Whitney Merciless. Since JJ went down with his torn pec, this team's done a lot to kind of revamp the secondary. We traded for Gary and Conley. We added Vernon Hargraves. Bradley Roby was hurt. Now he's back. So I think with JJ coming back, I don't really know if anybody can tell you what this defense is going to look like or what they're going to do. the one area that we lacked prior to this week is a pass rush, and JJ was all of our pass rush before he went down. I think he led the. I think he's missed months. I think he's missed 8 games, and I think he's number 3 or 4 in quarterback hits and quarterback pressures this season. So before he went down, even though he only had 4 sacks, he was getting to the quarterback, and he was getting tons of pressure and tons of quarterback hits. I expect now with a full year, Angelo Blackson. Also, a lot of people don't talk about DJ Reader enough. He's our defensive tackle. He's probably a top 5 defensive tackle in the league. When you add J.J. Watt back to this defense and you take into consideration what this secondary has shown over the last 6 weeks prior, with J.J. not being there, I think the defense has the potential to be a much better defense than what people are talking about, what people have seen in the past. If you just look at just what we did against the Patriots, what we did against the Chiefs, this team any sack that we got prior to this week was they were coverage sacks, and that's not something you've ever been able to say about this Texans defense. Garrett Conley's playing at an extremely high level for us. Bradley Roby's a hell of a corner. Vernon Hargreaves has really taken to this team and this culture and really looks to have turned it around based on things that we heard and saw in Tampa Bay. So when you have that, and then you add to the fact that JJ is back and he's going to be lined up against Cody Ford, I think JJ could really be a big part of what this defense does on Sunday.
Yeah, and that, like I said, this Texans team has a ton of pieces that makes this game a complete, for lack of a better term, this game's a complete wild card game. You don't know what's going to happen. We have J.J. Watt back. We have Carlos Hyde that could get going early. We have Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins. There is a ton of studs on this Texans defense, and yet they are the 4th seed. They are in a division that kind of gets bullied around a lot about, they're not very good all the time, and everyone always says, oh, Jacksonville's terrible, Tennessee's terrible, and yet they constantly send 2 teams to the playoffs. As the winner of the AFC South, do the Texans feel a little disrespected? I mean, they got a stud quarterback, one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the game, and some great pieces around. As a 4th seed, they got to feel a little bit of disrespect, right?
Well, I think you're probably asking the wrong guy about the disrespect aspect. I don't put any weight into the national media and the amount of attention we get. Now, if you took a poll of Texans fans, everybody would say that that's exactly right. We won a terrible division again, right? And the Titans snuck in there. We let them in at their win last week, and that's not playing our starters. But the AFC South really is it's a competitive division. It's a division that lost Andrew Luck this year, which would have changed probably the outcome of the division as a whole. So I don't think that there's disrespect. I don't think in that locker room there's any feeling of disrespect. I don't think they really put a lot of thought into that. I think this team knows that they have the potential to be a great team. They've shown that potential, and then they've also shown just the inconsistencies that they have on offense. And they're capable of beating anybody in the playoffs, but at the same time, with games like the Broncos, the Jags, the Panthers, you wonder sometimes if they're going to be able to put it together.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is you have a team that the Bills are going against this week that have, went into Foxborough and beat the Patriots on, a huge stage. But that's the same team that turned around and lost the following week to Drew Lock. So there's a lot of interesting things about this Houston Texans team that there's so many questions. There's so many questions. The inconsistency of everything. What makes this team kind of tick and move, because it being in the AFC South, not a lot of eyes can go on this team as much as everyone would like to think. It's kind of like the Bills in the respect. Everyone dogs the Bills for being in the AFC East, and while the Patriots are just a dominant force in the AFC East, the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills have not done much to, go at the Kings, so to say. So there's a lot of similarities between this Bills team and this Texans team. I think when it comes down to individual matchups, I would take the Texans in this game 100%. But when it comes down to units, I think Sean McDermott has done a great job building this team. And I think having you on and kind of picking the brain of a Texans side of the ball, it really is an interesting read. I think this game is going to be a slobber knocker. I can't expect a shootout, but I don't think it's going to be low scoring either. I think these teams are really going to go at each other. Do you have a prediction for the game by any chance?
I don't necessarily have a prediction. I think that I guess technically I do. I think the Texans will win this game. And I don't think it has anything to do with just the fact that the Bills are a bad team. I really enjoy the Bills. I enjoy what they're doing. I love Josh Allen. As I told you, in our DMs, I'm a big Josh Allen fan. I think the way you guys are handling his development is something you're not seeing around the NFL a lot. I think it's something that the franchise should be praised for. If we lost, I wouldn't be surprised because I do think that you guys are a really good team. On our show that we recorded Monday, I mentioned how you guys are basically what everybody expected the Browns to be, right? Coming into the season, nobody expected the Bills to have the season that they had. And everybody was on the Browns bandwagon saying that, they're going to the playoffs, they're going to make some noise. And then yet here are the Bills who had a quiet offseason, signed John Brown, but, drafted Devin Singletary, obviously took Ed Oliver. But outside of that, there wasn't really any key pieces that were added. And I love what you guys are building. I think you guys have an opportunity to beat us. It just all depends on the game plan of what Bill O'Brien puts together. It also depends on Deshaun Watson. That's something that we haven't talked about, and that's one of the areas that if you were to talk to a normal fan that just watches the games on Sunday and kind of goes away, they would tell you that Deshaun Watson isn't part of the problem on offense. But if you talk to somebody who's watched film and watches the All-22 and has really put Deshaun Watson under a microscope, Deshaun Watson is what makes this team go. And the inconsistency of the offense, really the responsibility of it all point towards Deshaun Watson. If you guys are able to take away his first read and make him think, he's struggling right now. When that's the case, if he's having a hard time anticipating his throws, throwing his wide receivers open, I think there's a lack of trust between him and Kenny Stills at times, and that's where you start to see the Will Fuller thing. He trusts Will Fuller, he loves Will Fuller. He can, when he's on the field, he's basically another number one wide receiver to Deshaun. So, this game, it's going to be a great game. I really believe that. I hate that today at 3:35 because I think this will be one of the games of wildcard weekend that people will talk about, as it should be a really good one. But I do expect the Texans to win.
Yeah, and I think if you took a national poll, I think a lot of people would expect the Texans to win. They are the team that has been there before. The Bills are still a young team in terms of development. Everyone in Buffalo is going to say that this team's a year ahead of schedule, which is unusual to say for a team that won 10 games. And who knows? I mean, they did benefit from a really easy schedule. Next year they have the NFC West and the NFC North or West, so they have a lot of tough matchups coming up next year. This is kind of the year where they're kind of trying to seize as much as they can. I can't wait for Saturday. I think it's going to be a fantastic time. It might be the best game of the weekend. It might be the best game out of 2 weekends. This is two teams that match up very interestingly to each other that I really think we could see a lot of playoff football out of, and it's going to be awesome.
I wouldn't be surprised if the winner of this game is they win a division game as well. I think the Bills, the way that they're built and the strength of their defense, you guys have basically been in all the games that you guys have played. You guys played Baltimore great. You played the Patriots great. If you guys were to beat us, I wouldn't be surprised if that was, if that trend continued. And then I think with the Texans, if this offense can get going, we've seen at times that this offense is a top 5 offense. So if that offense becomes consistent, then I think that we're a real problem in the playoffs. But I agree. I think it's going to be a great game. It couldn't happen to two better fan bases. The Bills fan base is just, the passion that you guys have is just incredible. And I'm not even talking about like the Bills Mafia and slamming through tables and stuff like that. I just think that when it comes to your fans and the way that you guys love this team, it's just amazing to see. And then same with the Texans. So it's going to be a great game. I think fans are really going to enjoy what they see on Saturday, and the best team will win.
See, I think it's crazy enough that maybe the best team doesn't even win this game. I think it just might come down to the craziest thing happens. I think these teams are two great teams that it might be, with the quarterbacks that they have and the pieces they have around, they might be two teams that meet each other in the playoffs consistently through this decade, honestly. I think these are two very fun teams to watch. I don't think there's a more fun team in the league than a guy that can throw a ball up to DeAndre Hopkins and just catch it at any point in the ball. I think he's the most fascinating player in the NFL, and being able to see him go against Trey White this week is going to be awesome.
I think that's going to be a fun matchup. I think one of the things, and I talked about it the other day, is one thing that you guys should keep an eye on is when DeAndre Hopkins is lined up in the slot. That's where he's done a lot of his damage this year, in the middle of the field, a lot of it on third downs. I'd be interested to see how many first downs DeAndre Hopkins has caught for this team, as it probably leads the league in third down conversions from a wide receiver standpoint. But yeah, I mean, Trey White is, I said it the other day, I think he's the best quarterback in the league. I've always liked Trey White. I don't think people realize how good he is, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's on the Buffalo Bills. We have that stigma on our team as well, because we're the Texans. There's not a lot to talk about our individual players that are really good, but it's between him and Steven Gilmore. Yeah, it's just going to be so fun. There's so many matchups to watch, and from a football perspective, you really couldn't ask for a better matchup. And, you guys have a bright future. I think that's one thing that people need to start paying attention to, especially with, I don't want to say the downfall of the Patriots, but with what you guys are building and how you guys are playing, it's going to be really fun to see what the Bills can continue to do in the NFL.
Hey, that's high praise. I really appreciate that. James, I appreciate you coming on. It's New Year's Day. You could have had a million other things to do, but you decided to talk to us all the way up here in Buffalo. Texans Unfiltered Podcast. You can see it on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, and CastBox. James, I hope you have a great day. Go Bills. Go Texans.